Hey guys, Technoman here with a video for you guys. In today's video, we're going to be comparing the iPhone XS Max with the iPhone 7 Plus in a head-to-head comparison in 2021 between these two devices. We're going to look at the hardware, the software, and overall performance on iOS 14. And what can you expect with these two phones, whether you're upgrading from the 7 to the iPhone XS Max, or you're just looking to compare what you can get out of these two phones in terms of price, camera, software stability, and all of that and much more we're going to cover in this video. But before we go ahead and get started, if you guys are new to our channel, we do a lot of tech news, reviews, and giveaways, so make sure to hit that subscribe button. Also, if you guys are in the market for one of these newer phones to get it at a discounted price, make sure you guys check out the link in the description section. So let's go ahead and get started with today's review video. First thing first is the release date of both of these two phones. It's been some time since both of the phones have been released. The iPhone 7 here was released in 2016 around the annual Apple release date of its flagship phone, and then 2 years later in 2018 the iPhone XS Max was released, and a lot has changed just by looking at the display. You can notice it right off the bat. We'll talk about the display in a little bit, but before we talk about the display, let's talk about the build of both of these two phones by looking at the size comparison between these two phones. The iPhone 7 and the iPhone XS Max aren't quite a comparison that we would want to do because the XS Max is the bigger size one. You probably want to compare the iPhone 7 Plus for a true comparison because of the bigger size. But nonetheless, we want to do a comparison to show you guys the size difference if you're looking to go from one to another. As you can see, when you hold them side by side, the iPhone 7 here just looks really tiny and the iPhone XS Max just looks like a giant next to it, and that's because of the Max, what used to be known as the plus sizes on the iPhone 6, 7, and the 8, of course. And we'll notice the other difference between it is that matte versus that glass back here. That's because of the build material between these two devices. The iPhone 7 here just has that aluminum body built to it and the front glass, of course. The iPhone XS Max here, on the other hand, has sort of stainless steel. This is the surgical grade stainless steel, supposed to be more durable glass, and because of that glass back, it's able to do wireless charging, which isn't possible on the iPhone 7 that we have here. And the other thing you'll notice between these two phones is sort of the camera build. Of course, the iPhone 7 just has that one 12 megapixel camera, where the iPhone XS Max has that dual 12 megapixel camera. And in the camera section, we'll talk a little bit more about it. Other thing you'll notice is the label on it on the iPhone. Both of them does have the word iPhone on here, but on the iPhone XS Max here, Apple has removed those little bit of fine print that they have printed on these two devices. Also, another thing you'll notice, because of that stainless steel body versus the aluminum body, is sort of a rounder, thicker edge on the iPhone XS Max. It's reflective compared to that matte design on the iPhone 7. And to talk about the matte, we'll talk about the weight of both of these two phones, or varying weight, because the iPhone 7 here that we have, it weighs around just a little under 5 ounces compared to the iPhone XS Max, which weighs a little over 7 ounces, almost 2.5 ounces heavier, and it really does feel it. So if you have a smaller hand, the iPhone 7 does sit well, but if you have bigger hands, the iPhone XS Max, because it's huge, it sits nicely. So depending on what kind of hands you have and weight you're looking for, the iPhone have varying sizes and of course varying differences. And to talk about that, we want to talk about the display between these two phones and why there's so much change in the display. The iPhone 7, first let's talk about that a little bit. What kind of display are you getting? You're getting a 4.7 Retina, a diagonal widescreen LCD display with IPS technology with a 1334 by 750 pixel resolution at 326 ppi, and you get 1400 to 1 contrast ratio. Whereas the iPhone XS Max, it beats all of those specs by far because of that OLED display. You have a massive 6.5-inch diagonal all-screen OLED display on the iPhone XS Max, which has Super Retina compared to just the Retina display on the 7. That's a change on the iPhone XS Max. You also have that HDR display, and the iPhone XS Max has here one of the biggest resolutions we've seen across any of the iPhone. It has 2688 by 1242 pixel at 458 ppi. It also has a 1,000,000 to 1 contrast ratio compared to only 1400 to 1 on it. It also has this other unique feature to the display we want to talk about, is that True Tone, which allows the phone to automatically adjust the display based on the ambient lighting condition to make the color feel more consistent on it. Besides that, there's similarities between these two phones. Both of the phones does have wide color display. They have 3D touch to both of them, as you can see here. They also have the same sort of bright init to a 625. So those are the similarities in terms of the display. But LCD versus OLED will always win over it. But because of that OLED, the next thing we want to talk about is storage configuration and the price of these two phones. You'll notice the iPhone XS Max here, both of them does start at different storage capacity. The iPhone 7 here starts with 32 gig. That's the base model you get on the iPhone 7 here, where on the iPhone XS Max you start with 64 gig as the base model. The base price point on both of the phones are varying as well. The iPhone 7 here started when it was released in 2016, you paid around $649. Compared to the iPhone XS Max, when it came out in 2018, Apple increased the price to almost by $500. You paid around $1099 on the iPhone XS Max. So $500 difference. Why is that? Well, because a lot has changed around the camera, the OLED display, which Apple claims to be very expensive for its production line up. So that's the comparison. And comparison between these two phones is that if you're looking for a max storage configuration capacity, you're probably going to be looking at the Max, because it's able to have a max storage capacity of 512 gig, which is the max that you even get on the 12 lineup. And besides that, a couple other things we want to talk about is the water resistivity and dust resistivity of both of the phones. Both of the phones are water resistant. Slight difference is that the iPhone 7 gives you 1 meter at 30 minutes, whereas the iPhone XS Max gives you 2 meters up to 30 minutes. So 1 meter, 2 meter doesn't make a difference. Well, we're going to tell you guys one thing. Because the Max does have both front and back being all glass, if there's a crack or any sort of damage that's easily done on the Max, it's going to be water compromised, just like the iPhone 7. If you take in more than 1 meter, you're going to have a water damaged phone. So do be careful on both of the phones. And let's talk about the chip on both of these phones. What kind of chip does these phones have? Well, both of the phones have varying chip. The iPhone 7, because it was released in 2016, it has what's known as A10 Fusion chip. Where the iPhone XS Max, here it has A12 Bionic chip, along with the second generation of neural engine, which isn't evident or found on the iPhone 7 lineup, and that's where you get a lot of the speed and bigger RAM. And the other thing to note is that the iPhone XS Max has 4 gigs of RAM, a huge increase from that 2 gig that we've seen on the iPhone 7 lineup. And talking about the RAM, let's talk about the other feature of these two phones, or the battery life. What kind of battery life does these two phones have? Well, if we look at the battery life on both of these two phones, the iPhone 7 here compared to the iPhone XS, that has no match. The iPhone 7 has almost a 3200 mAh battery. That's a huge battery. It needs that extra bit of power because of that OLED display. The iPhone 7 has to deliver a lot more power, and a lot more power doesn't really give you a lot more in terms of how long it lasts. Well, the iPhone 7 here lasts you about 13 hours in terms of video playback, compared to the iPhone XS Max, which gives you 15 hours. So you only get 2 hours of increase with the bigger battery, because the OLED does consume up battery a lot quicker than the iPhone 7 that we have. And aside to that, let's talk about the camera. This is the area that Apple has always goes and tackles in every new phone that Apple tries to do sort of improvement incrementally on the camera, because of the ability between these two phones. One thing we're going to notice is both phones does take good pictures, but to take great pictures is probably what you're looking at is the iPhone here that we have, the XS Max. One thing you'll notice between these two phones is that the iPhone 7 does not support portrait mode. So all that natural lighting, studio lighting, contour lighting, stage lighting, and all of that are not available on the iPhone 7, because it only has that single camera versus that dual camera on the iPhone XS Max here. Another thing to notice is the square mode that you see on the 7 isn't available on the XS Max. Not sure if that really matters, because it's something you can really adjust. And talking about another aspect is video, is around optical zoom. On the iPhone 10s Max here, as you can see, we're able to do 2 times the optical zoom, which the iPhone with that single camera does not allow you to do. And another thing we want to talk about between these two phones is the video recording capability, and that's something we'll look at by looking in the settings here. You'll notice on the iPhone 7 here, you don't have as much of feature of the camera like you do on the iPhone 10s Max. Because you're able to record video, you only have from 720 pixel HD at 30 frames per second all the way to one setting of 4K at 30 frames per second, whereas on the iPhone 10s Max you go from 720 all the way to 4K at 20 frames per second, 30 frames per second, and also 60 frames per second. A lot going on around the camera space on the iPhone 10s Max. You also get this extended range on the iPhone thanks to that optical zoom. You have portrait mode, you have smart HDR, and iPhone 7 just has regular HDR photos on it. And between these two phones, let's talk about the next aspect, which is the software on both of these two phones. Both of the phones in 2021 are able to download iOS 14, run iOS 14 pretty smoothly on both of the phones. But one thing we're going to mention about both of these phones is they have slightly different life along with it. So the iPhone 7 here is pretty much near the end of iOS support. We're not really sure if it will get the iOS 15 update or not yet. It's almost 50-50 right now. We're not quite sure because Apple does tend to start giving iOS update around that 4 to 5 year mark on its iPhone here, compared to the iPhone 10s Max, which we expect will get another 2 to 3 year of major updates. So expect to get iOS 17, even possibly iOS 18 on it. But nonetheless, both of the phones, if you're using it for things like social media, your gaming, your utilities, your entertainment, your shopping, food, information, reading, finance, productivity tool, all of those tools are working, all those apps are running, no doubt. Both of the phones are supported. One thing we will note is that for video streaming, the iPhone 10s Max, because of that bigger display, does give you that tablet-like feel, and it just feels much more smoother and easier on the eye. Perfect for watching shows, Netflix or YouTube videos, Hulu, all of that. If you're a person that does a lot of streaming, you probably want the Max because of those reasons. And finally, to conclude the video, why might you buy one phone over the other? What is that you really need to know? Well, let's talk about the iPhone 7. Why might you buy the iPhone 7 in 2021? First thing first is that it's fingerprint. So if you still can't get over the fact that Apple moved away from fingerprint to the Face ID, that's where you're getting the fingerprint. You're getting a phone that's really just light and small. You have almost 70-gram lighter compared to the Max, which is huge and bulky. On a hand that's smaller, it's about 0.6 millimeter thinner and about 10 millimeters narrower, about 19.2 millimeter shorter of it, and it has less volume to the body compared to the iPhone 10s. And the other aspect on the iPhone 7 is that the budget friendliness in 2021. If you don't have a lot of money to spend or not have too much to spend, the iPhone 7 you can probably get around $120-$130 right now. Buy it if you're buying a pre-owned. If you buy a new, probably under $200. So it's a budget-friendly phone. Still a amazing phone for things like calling and texting, light browsing. So if you're not really concerned with all the fancy stuff, the iPhone 7 still gets the job done. Compared to the iPhone 10s Max, why might you buy the iPhone 10s Max? Well, there's a lot of reason why you might buy the 10s Max. First things first is the battery power. You get almost 1.6 more battery power to it. You get a faster chip. How faster, you might say? It has almost a 22% faster GPU speed to it because it has 4 gigs of RAM compared to that only 2 gigs that's available on the iPhone 7. So if you're doing heavy graphic gaming like PUBG, Fortnite, games that are meant to play on the console, the iPhone 7 here, bigger display with better resolution, does phenomenal job in that area as well. And you almost have a 38% bigger screen display. And if you're really looking for a maxed out storage, you're able to get the configuration of 512 gig on the iPhone 10s Max unfortunately only go up to 256 gig on the iPhone 7 that we have. So those are the differences between these two phones. Of course, on the price point on the iPhone 10s Max, because it's a newer phone, a phone that started almost close to $1,100, you can pretty much get this phone half the price, probably under $500 now in 2021. And a lot of the features haven't really improved much on the iPhone 11 Pro Max lineup or even the 12 Pro Max lineup. The only thing we see that difference between in the iPhone 10s Max and the 12 Pro Max is probably the 5G antenna and of course a little bit improvement in performance. But the phone does pack quite the function. You're not paying like $1,200 you would pay on an iPhone 12 Pro Max lineup. So there's our comparison between these two phones. We want to hear from you guys. If you guys upgraded or using one phone or another, how has your experience been? Leave a comment in the comment section. Hopefully this video is helpful for anyone looking to compare both of these phones. Thanks for watching, guys. See you guys next time.